It's about to go down with Marc and Cathey, a live coaching show about dropping ideas. Marc and Cathey coach and have conversations with brilliant idea creators who are reimagining the world through the expression of their words, thoughts, and actions.
Hey, what's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of It's About to Go Down. I am Marc Williams.
And I'm Cathey Armillas. I'm super excited. We have Sava Georgalis here today, and we have this interesting intersection, the three of us. Savas is a TV documentary producer, and Marc and I are speaker coaches and speakers ourselves. And we found this interesting convergence of like, where does a good idea come from? And so this is going to be the basis of our conversation today. It may run a little bit differently than most of our shows, because usually we're coaching somebody on their idea. But today we're going to talk about the idea of ideas, I think. Like, where do good ideas come from? How do we cultivate them? And I think with the story really starts back maybe, I don't know, 13, 14 years ago when Savas and I first met.
Long time ago.
And so we met. Savas, welcome to our show. And why don't you tell everybody how we met?
yeah, for sure. Oh, it's a pleasure to be talking to you both. I'm really thrilled to be here. Here digitally talking to you. Yeah, I mean, just going back to it, Cathey, thinking about when we first crossed paths, I was this young buck producer for a History Channel series called Modern Marvels. And the whole concept of the series was to explain how stuff works, basically going into factories and how you make this, how you make that. And we found your company at the time. I think the videos were called Watch It Shred. And so we typed in, it was a show about sharp objects, and we thought it'd be cool to see something cut up. And then we found your company's videos, and then I came up with a small crew to the company to watch you guys tear some stuff up for us. And so yeah, we came into it trying to figure out, how do we decide what to feature, what order do we put it in, how do we explain it, and then there's this format for the History Channel for this series. How do we put it into that format? And that was that's where we met, Cathey, and you were very helpful, very communicative, and I think that's what helped us figure out how to make this segment work, is that you understood what we needed, and I think we understood through you what was available and how to make that work. So I can't believe it was that long ago, but that was the idea. Yeah, so we filmed it, put it in a segment, and put it on History Channel, and that series ran for 10 or 12 years, which is kind of unheard of. So there was something about that worked. It was kind of simple, but it was a very formatted presentation of all kinds of stuff. So anyway, it was fun to work on. I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot too.
Now, Marc, you're you'll love this, because you know the shredder story. You know that I was the director of marketing at an industrial shredder company. You know that I created this series called Watch It Shred, and I put things on the internet right before YouTube launched, and it went viral before YouTube was even on the scene. And we were on a bunch of TV shows, and we went viral before anybody really knew what that meant. And it was kind of a happy accident on my part. It wasn't like I went to the CEO and I was like, hey, let's spend a bunch of money on this little flash player and let's put videos up, because someday we're going to end up on TV and we're going to make all this money. It wasn't even about that. So it's going to be interesting to have this conversation from both directions, Savas, because you were taking something that we were doing just as kind of a way to promote to kind of our segment in our world of like, I had this idea, like, if you can promote it to everybody, you can find the really cool, interesting thing in there that everybody would be interested in, then especially that smaller segment would be interested. Because at the time, everybody in this industry was just like, we have shredders. And then like and everybody in their ads would like show a picture of the shredder. And it was like, everybody's showing the same outside. And it was like, how do you differentiate yourself? So we started running the videos and saying, well, watch it shred. We're going to shred torpedoes. We're going to shred computers. We're going to shred fun things like soccer balls. And so we kind of made a campaign out of it. So Marc, it's kind of cool for you maybe to go back to the beginning of this story.
Yeah, well, I remember you talking about that story when I first met you, way back in the day, probably about 3 or 4 years after that all went viral. And it's funny that we even used the word viral, because you said right? It went viral before we even used that word, right? And because you brought up that word, and because we're talking about, where do good ideas come from and how do you promote an idea that reaches everybody? First of all, I'm thinking, Savas, I got a question for you. You got this whole documentary called Modern Marvels, and something in your head thinks metal and sharp objects. What would make you think?
That's a good point.
Like that?
I mean,
how did you come up with that idea?
Yeah, the answer is probably more mundane than you might expect. But it's interesting though, because so basically when we started, and I want to come back to that shredding idea for a second too, because what you described, Cathey, is pretty genius to go from just showing the machine to watching it do stuff, because that's what's really relatable and that's what got us onto it. But to your question, Mark, we start with at the time we started with just a title, and in this show was World's Sharpest. What is that? There was no definition. It was just World's Sharpest. It was Modern Marvel's World's Sharpest. So we started thinking, well, what's sharp? A knife, a laser? How do you define something that's sharp? And then it became to, well, maybe something that could cut anything, right? So you can kind of see the ideas start to evolve. So in that episode, we had the sharp, quote unquote, sharpest knife, which was a Japanese style. I think it's called a katana blade, if I'm not mistaken. Is it really the sharpest? Probably not, but it was really sharp and the technique was really cool and visual. So we thought, okay, let's do that. And this is years ago, so I'm really stretching to remember. We did a laser cutter, so like a big metal plate. But that was the idea. Is like, how do we incorporate something that would be fun to watch, that's interesting, and that kind of fits this general heading of sharp. And that's where we found Cathey's company. We're sort of poking around. I was like, okay, shredding, sharp, and then these videos pop up. And I think, Cathey, if it was just a list of on Google at the time, there really wasn't. I think you're right. There really wasn't YouTube the way we have it now. But if on Google at the time we were just finding 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 companies with shredders, we might have found one that worked. But that popped so clearly because it was, and I'll use the word quickly, relatable. Like it was so obvious how this works and how much fun it would be to see it and to understand how it worked. That if another company didn't do that, other companies didn't do that, like you may not ever catch it. It's like the laser etching story didn't have a shredding type video. We had to think, okay, I had to call, what do you guys do? What does it look like? Oh, cool, you do that. Okay, that won't work. So that construction of that, the storytelling of how the company does their shredders or presented their shredders, it really caught our attention and it worked for that project. But it was, at the end of the day, Mark, a lot of TV, it really is a visual process. I mean, it seemed obvious, but that's why a podcast isn't really on TV. I mean, a podcast is a conversation. Yeah, you have interviews and news interviews as well. But for an entertaining documentary or really any feature, a lot of the work goes into the visuals, which can be, again, as a presentation, it might literally be pictures. It can be charts when you try to engage with people. But on TV, it's sort of what looks interesting, because that's half the medium, right? Part of it is conversational and audio, following a story, but the other half is pictures and what are we seeing? So that's what went into the process of deciding what to put in that project.
What a cool thing from your perspective too. I remember when you first called us, and by the way, he wasn't the one that I hung up on. The very first time I got a call from a TV producer, I thought it was a prank from my sister, and I actually hung up, and then I ended up it was a David Letterman show. I literally hung up on the producer.
Oh, wow.
I thought it was a joke. I hung up. He emailed me. I was like, oh, okay. But no, I didn't hang up on Savas. I ended up but from our perspective too, I remember when you first contacted us, just to get into the weeds a little bit, because I think it's important on how an idea on the surface could look really simple and easy to the world, but look at how much thought was put behind it. When you first called us, I was like, world's sharpest. Well, our blades actually aren't that sharp. And then when I went to tell the CEO, he goes, well, the technicality of it is that there's a shear point. And the shear point with the torque behind it is what it basically rips it apart. But it's using the force of these, and then of course, however many, hooks that we would put, the distance between those is typically how big the output would be of what it was ripping apart. So it was sharp in the sense that it had the torque and the power behind it, but visually, so technically it might have not been sharp like a knife that might cut you really bad. Like you could touch any of those knives when they're not moving and it wouldn't hurt you. But the interesting part was what you saw. Like we at that time, I think we had a bunch of videos up. We were shredding soccer balls that were making loud noises and popping out of the air, and just for fun, just to show like what we could do. So I like that we're talking about what looks interesting.
Well, and one more thing on that about the sharpest part of it, if this, this is going to sound silly, but this is an example of why simplifying and finding these headlines and hooks works for storytelling, and I would expect communications. If the show was called World's Best Torque, no one's watching that, right? No one cares about that. Or again, if Cathey, if the company was
hilarious,
if the company was just showing diagrams of these different, they weren't knives, I guess, but blades, right? The blades. And you don't ever see it working. It doesn't quite land, right? So I know that's oversimplifying it, but to see it working and then to frame it in a way that says world sharpest, and also from the other side, I could take this example and apply it to 100 different things, but if the other side doesn't buy in, so if we're trying to describe as a TV producer a certain technology, it could be anything. If the other side doesn't buy, okay, cool, I need to simplify some things or leave some things out so people can understand it, it won't work, right? To give you a more specific example, I've worked on a lot of science shows that talk about really complicated topics. So quantum theory, which I won't go into here because I'm not an expert at all, and it's extremely complicated. But if I'm trying to, as a producer, take quantum theory and present it in an entertaining way to a wide audience, there's just no way I can go through every iteration of how it works and every caveat for why it doesn't work and where you can apply it, where you can't apply it. You have to kind of pick the parts that are accessible. And if the other side, the professor, the engineer, the company CEO doesn't buy into, okay, cool, I can leave out some of this stuff so my message gets through so I can communicate it, then it won't work. And I've been in that situation too, where I'm working with a researcher, a professor, like, well, I got to explain this in exactly this way. And I'm in my head, I'm thinking, well, if you do it that way, no one's going to be able to follow you, right? So that's where the other side comes in, Cathey, what you're talking about, that your CEO, I think you said, had to say, well, it is sharp in this way, in a way that people can understand. So.
Yeah.
Hold on. I got to pause for a minute, because for anybody who's watching, right, who has an idea, wants to come up with idea, whatever the case may be, I just want to pause for a moment and appreciate what was just shared about finding titles and hooks, because the question in my head was world's sharpest. Like, what makes that work? For anybody who's trying to come up with, whether it be a book title, a movie title, a documentary title, a speech title, like there's a science, or at least I like to think there's a science behind this. And maybe you just said it. Maybe it's simplified. Maybe it has an accessible part. But if you could speak a little bit more about what is it that makes this title world's sharpest?
That's a really good question, Mark. And it's not just in television. I've listened to interviews and talked to the people about this, but you just said it too. Books, films, TV shows. If you find the right title, that's such a huge part of it, because it frames the conversation for the creator. I'll say conversation. It can be
right, whatever medium, right? Exactly.
But it also frames the expectation for the viewer, the audience. And there are, I'm trying to think of some examples off the top of my head, but there are films that have exactly the right title and they work, and some that are really soft. When I say soft, they're not very specific or detailed, so you're not really sure what you're watching, and it can really affect the experience. So it's not an accident that I'm just thinking right now, the project I just finished, have been working for a National Geographic series called Drain the Oceans. And Mark, I can't even tell you how many minutes or even hours of conversation we had about naming a couple of the specific episodes. And I can't get into the behind the scenes of what we were doing, but it was really about, okay, we'll name it this. If someone's going through their TV guide, will that catch their attention? And then if it does, is it really speaking to what's in that program? It is not an accident. There's a lot of thought that goes into, it's the secret of something, it's the mystery of something, it's the name of this straight up, like it's just a place, is that enough? So it is a lot. And I think that is important to think about, again, depending on the type of project, how to frame it with a headline, whether the audience maybe even sees, I think in my case, in my business, they will see it. But I would say that, maybe on your side of things, if someone's having a talk with a group, maybe there isn't an actual literal headline, but I think it does help frame the parameters of where that discussion is supposed to go. So yeah, I think it's a big part of it. Like, where do you start? It's the organizing principle. It's something else I think about a lot. If you go into a creative enterprise of any kind, if you just start going, like I'll use this example. If you're going to build a house and you have no idea how big it's supposed to be, you have no lot restrictions, no budget restrictions, no material restrictions, you might spend your entire lifetime trying to redesign. You'll put a turret in here. You might make a glass front. If there's no organizing principle, but if you decide, okay, I want it to be a cabin, right? All of a sudden, when you think of a cabin, you start to have some parameters, and that can help make decisions. So it's the same. I think the title is an analogy to that. It's an organizing principle that helps direct the project. I mean, it is important. It really is important.
Is there an organizing principle to creating a title?
I wish there was a science to it, but I think you can't overcomplicate it. I think that if there is an organizing principle, I'm coming back to this word accessible. It's going to have to click. I'm trying to think of a good one now. Here's one. I watched this movie recently. It's a classic. Are you familiar with The Princess Bride?
Yeah.
Okay. Came out in 86, 88. I just read this book about it. And one of the producers admits that they didn't name that film. He used the word soft title. Like, when you hear the term Princess Bride, like, what does that actually mean, right? If you don't know what's in the film, you're thinking, oh, it's about a princess. Maybe it's a love story. It's a romance, right? But if you renamed it something like, I don't know, pirates and princesses, already you start to see that there's some. So the organizing principle, I don't know if there's one, Mark. I think it's really about what's the essence of the project, right? What is it? What's happening? And then finding the phrasing that captures that essence. It sounds simple, and sometimes it is. Other times we never find it. Like, we can go in circles and come up with a dozen ideas. I mean, there was a project last year on the Same Drain the Ocean series, and this one episode won awards for how it was presented. This is in the nonfiction documentary world. No Academy Awards here, nothing that gigantic, but it won awards within this circuit of professionals. But it didn't rate well. It just didn't. And the executives felt that one reason it didn't rate well is the title didn't sell the project. I'm not sure that's true, but it might be. It might be that as you're flipping through that TV guide, the title we had on there didn't reflect the adventure or the mystery or the fun of what was in that episode. So again, coming back, I'm kind of circling back on where I was, but it is important, and it takes a lot of thought. There are hired professionals, I'm not sure if you knew this, Marc or Cathey, I'm not saying this out of turn, that work on naming things. Like, there are companies that will go to people and say, hey, come up with some names for this, for books, for films. It's a whole industry. Okay, industry might be too strong, but I know someone who did this. Like, a friend of a friend who did this. I know it exists. Like, I was like, really? You make that much money just coming up with names? Like, I want to do that. But it's important, right? It's part of the marketing. I mean, Cathey, you know this probably better than anyone. It's part of the marketing of it. If you don't frame it the right way, people won't buy it. They won't understand it. They won't engage with it.
Yes.
You know what I like that where our conversation has led is that, oh, and by the way, because we're going to drop this later, we tried to have a show last week, and it got shut down due to power issues. But we ended up having an hour-long conversation in the dark. So well in the dark for me, not for Marc and Savas. My power went out. But we had this great conversation. There was lots of things that were brought up, and we'll probably air this as a special addition to this show because the conversation was phenomenal. And I think one of the things that keeps coming up that I love, and I want to put this in the right terms because I think the three of us have been talking about it a lot, but I want to make sure that we put this out here as an idea for anybody that's trying to sell anything or create anything, whether it be a documentary or a speech or a book or whatever. is this thing that you said, Savas, and you've said it today a little bit different than we talked about, like the framing. I would be super excited. I would call it a concept. I call things a concept, right? I'm like, oh, we got to have our concepts in our, like, you have to have something that people can go, oh, I know what that means. And I'm starting to create a mental movie in my head about this thing that you talked about. I don't see how anybody, I think that if you look at any successful movie, book, anything, music, there's something there that's, look at music. Sometimes it's the catchy hook, right? You listen to the lyrics and you're like, oh my God, is that what they're actually saying? Like, my goodness. Like,
Yes.
So many titles just went through my head just now.
Right? I know, right? But I think that and I love, Savas, how you said this. So I'd love for us to have this conversation really quick about this, is like, it seems so simple, but that the simplicity is hard to get to. It's so simple, it's hard. It's so simple that it's hard. Like, it's so, like, to make something really simple can be very, very, very hard. And that is,
I mean, something that I probably have mythologized in my own experience is Hemingway, you know, how he approached his work. And I don't know if you've ever read or enjoyed Hemingway. I happen to like his books because he writes in a very simple, direct way. So the very simple sentences and vocabulary is fairly accessible. But from what I understand of his process is that he worked really, really hard to get it down to that. I don't remember the percentage he would cut out, but it's kind of counterintuitive. The simplicity takes work. It's almost, I think the creative process in some ways is, I mean, I'll just sort of say basically how I think it'll work for any enterprise. It's what's the idea someone's trying to get across, right? What are you trying to get to? And then just go with it. Just write it out, draw it out, whatever that process is, and let the whole mess just be what it is. And then that's what I think the important work comes in. What can we cut out to simplify the message? What do we have to keep? What can we get rid of? Yeah, it's the work to make it simple. I think when something looks really simple and works really well, it reflects how much it's not by accident. Right. And this is what we're talking about. How do we get there? And again, all I can say, just to go back to that point, is we said this, I think, on a different discussion, or maybe I'm remembering it incorrectly, but I think one of the shortcuts, I'll use that word, one of the shortcuts to get through and create something that people can engage with is to figure out where you want to get to. What's the point you're trying to make? And then retrofit ideas, right? Because if you, again, I'll go back to the house analogy. If you don't know what your land plot size is to start with, you don't know what your restrictions are, you can just build some monstrosity. But if you know, okay, I have to keep this cabin on this plot of land, and I have to make sure that it fits here, then all the effort you put in from the beginning and the stuff you cut out will make sure it fits in that pocket, fits that style. And I think that's the first.
I was going to say, here's an interesting dichotomy of that, right? In order to create that house, you have to know those restrictions, right? You have to know what you want. And we talked about this last time too, and yet sometimes we get so caught up in what exactly we want that we actually stump our creative process, right? And that's why I like the way you said it earlier, right? What's the idea that I'm trying to get across? And then draw out, and I wrote this word because you used it, the mess. Like you have to throw all of the paint on the canvas. Like you said, Earning Simon went, put all the words on the page and then chisel it down. And I think that's a really important part of the process. Because if we do take that phrase that you use, it's the work that makes it simple, or as Cathey put it, it's so simple that it's hard. When we see a final product, again, whether it be book, TV, movie, documentary, speech, song, it seems like, oh man, how'd they so easily come up with that? And you don't even realize the many iterations. So I went to, and actually I think they have this in a couple of different cities around the world. They call it the Friends experience from the TV show. And it's a walk-through museum. It was actually, and I wasn't a hugest fan of Friends, but I very much enjoyed walking through this. But one thing that really stood out to me was the original title of the show. The original title was Insomnia Cafe. Well, who the hell is going to watch Insomnia Cafe?
Oh, how interesting.
Right?
How interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and then apparently I was, just kind of, because we go down this rabbit hole of research, we get interested, and then I found it went from Insomnia Cafe to Across the Hall to Friends Like Us, and then I guess somebody thought, let's simplify.
Friends.
What is this about? Friends.
Yeah,
That's your process that you just described.
no, it's great. Yeah, the other thing I want to pick up on that you just said, Mark, that I think I've learned over the years a little bit, is that first, I like, since we're using the phraseology of the first mess draft, I think, at least for me, I think a lot of people too, we're so self-critical when we get every sentence just right, or every picture just right, every phrasing just right, that sometimes we censor too much to start. And it's, I used to be an editor a long time ago too. I don't know if you knew that about me, Cathey. Years ago, I worked at CNN as an editor. And I learned there, it's like, okay, I have all these cool ideas for effects I want to put in, and I want to polish this and change the picture here and do all this color stuff. And you can't do it until the structure's in place. So this is the mess part. Just throw it out there on paper or throw it out there on the screen, and just try a bunch of stuff, then even step away for a bit, whether it's a day, a year, a decade sometimes. Like you hear this all the time with screenwriters and directors and producers who work on projects. They have to just get away from it because it's not working. Something about it isn't working. But if you have that first draft down, you have that first idea down, it won't work. You have to let the bad ideas go. And one more thing is, like, at least for me, again, I think everything at first is terrible that I work on. I hate all of it. The first draft is always terrible. Like, this isn't going to work. And then later you start to look at it and go, oh, wait, if I take this out, if I revise this, this can work. Even then I don't love it. Only later when it's finished, I can look at it and go, okay, it wasn't terrible, right? But I don't think many directors, writers, producers know right away the project's going to work or that it's even good. I mean, that's a dirty little secret, I think. If you ever go up to a director, and a friend of mine did this, I won't name the director, but a big name film director. I used to live in LA, so I'd go to these screenings and you can interact sometimes afterwards and ask questions. I remember one friend of mine walked up to his director and says, I love your work. I love that film you did. The guy kind of reacted sort of like, yeah, thank you. And at first you think, oh, he's just being rude. But we dissected it later. It's like, you know what? He probably can think of the 20 things that he doesn't like about that film. And that's why he's not going, yeah, I know, it was awesome, wasn't it? Like, you won't hear that answer. You just won't. Like, they just won't do that. So that's my point. We can be very self-critical and not see how good something can be, but you can't even get there until you get that first draft down. Just get the ideas out. Because if you censor yourself too soon, you'll kill the good stuff before it even has a chance to grow, I think.
Yeah, I love that. I love, it kind of goes hand in hand with, the naming, but also the content. Like, it's kind of, it's all intertwined. And sometimes I know that in that mess that we're kind of talking about, something beautiful emerges and you're like, that's the name. I just saw the other day, you probably know this, Mark, I didn't, but you know where Jay-Z's name came from? Because his real name's Sean Carter, right? So
right.
Oh, I'm gonna kill you with this if you don't know this because you live in Brooklyn.
Wait, something about Jazzy, right?
No, it's the Jay-Z subway lines in Brooklyn.
Yes, it's the Jay and Z train. Yes,
it's like a homage to the Jay-Z train. So yeah, no. It's really cool. And could you imagine him being like, oh, I need a stage name, and all the ices are gone, Ice Cube, Ice T. And he's like, okay, what else can I do? And like, to really think of something that would stick, and to even think about, even if we go down that route just for a second, think about all the famous actors, actresses, musicians, and whatnot that are like, they have a name that feels too normal. I guess it doesn't seem great, and so they have to come up with a name that's easier to pronounce or that gives them some differentiation. And that's what they have to do. Could the talent of Jay-Z have made Sean Carter an awesome name? Probably. And that's something I think you started to touch on, Savas, a little bit, is sometimes I've watched movies where I'm like, that was an awesome movie, had nothing to do with what I thought it was going to be at all. Like, what was that title? Or vice versa. You've watched a movie or heard a name and then you're like, it doesn't make any sense to me. Like, I don't know why. And sometimes the person can overcome that with the great. So I feel like there has to be, every single component is important, I think.
Yeah. Well, this is the example of The Princess Bride, just because I just read this book recently. That film didn't do very well in the first year or so. They didn't know how to market that film because it's kind of weird. If you've seen it, It's
Yeah.
part fairy tale, part comedy, and they just didn't
Right.
know what to do with it. And I actually went back and looked at a couple of the original trailers on YouTube, and I watch it. I'm thinking, wow, it wasn't even close. Like I wouldn't watch this, right? But
Right.
it became this cult classic. So it did overcome the title. So it's not impossible. But if there were a different approach to it, a different vision, a different framing, a different title, maybe it is a blockbuster runaway hit right away. So it's not insurmountable, but you can see how it makes a difference.
You know, I feel like what you just said can, if people really listen, give a lot of people a lot of great hope, right? Because sometimes what you have is a great idea, but to use the word frame it, maybe you just haven't framed it in a way to bring it out, right? And you said something earlier that I wrote down, you talked about, and you were talking about in terms of title, but I think this is really in terms of everything. It was fun to watch and it was interesting. And the thought I had was it that it was fun to watch and interesting, or that you framed it in a way that made it fun to watch and interesting?
That's true, right? That's a good question.
Because Cathey, I think about your story about Jay-Z. I don't know this part of the story and I don't know it to be true. But my guess is that when he said the J and the Z, somebody said, yeah, that's a dumb idea.
There's a lot of that on the idea trail as well, Mark. I mean, there are people that will really help develop an idea, and there are people that will stand in the way of it. And is there a way to decode who that is? I don't know that there's a secret to it, but I think as a creator, I'll just use that language here, it's important, in my opinion, to take all of it and then decide what the useful parts are, right? There can be critiques that are, in fact, I can't think of any project that didn't have a solid critique that worked. You kind of need someone to poke holes in something, right? But you don't want someone to destroy it. So this is part of the process. Like you need people to say, this doesn't make sense, or I don't like it. But there also have people that can encourage you and say, actually, this is really cool. I just didn't understand this part, or I love this. This is good. Go with it. That's part of it too. You kind of have to just hear out what the feedback is to make sure it's going where you want it to go. And to your point about ideas and how to sell them, or that's not really what you said, that's what popped into my head. You're making it fun and interesting. Part of I hope this is relatable, but part of my work is to pitch ideas. And it's not just saying, hey, if we go to, let's just use the shredding example again. If we go to this place and just watch something blow up, it'll be fun. Sometimes you have to sort of fit it in a way that it'll be accessible to people. So I'll just use a simple example of like, oh, if we put it in the show about sharp objects, it'll make a lot of sense. So I'm not using a great example, but the point is sometimes it's a subtle shift in presentation that can make an idea suddenly work. It's weird how sometimes and I get this feedback a lot with different projects where I think I have the best idea ever. It's like, but can't you see it? This is so cool. This is so funny. And someone says, actually, if you did it this way, it would be maybe better. And I look at it and go, oh my gosh, they're right. If I just flipped it this way, suddenly a bunch more people might like it, or, or it might be more interesting. So that's the funny part. You might be completely wrong about something and still right in its essence, just the framing of it.
I love that we're getting to that level of detail, because I don't think a lot of other people that don't have to work on stuff like this think that way. It's like, oh, there's a simple name there, and that's where people start to falsely say that there's a formula. And the only formula that there is that you should there's things that you should do. And we kind of talked about that before. Like you should check with other people. You shouldn't be trying to create stuff yourself and say, oh, this sounds brilliant. This will be great. Everybody will love this. And then it bombs, and I'm wondering if we could talk about that for a second, Savas, because I know that we had a conversation before about like, God, if you're writing something or you're script writing or you're creating content or thinking about an idea and trying to play it out, you're always going to bring it to an editor to have somebody look at it. And who are the people that we can trust? Because like in the speaking world, I know that this is a pet peeve for me. I don't know if you have experienced this, Mark, but I'll be coaching somebody on a TED Talk, and then I'm working really hard and I might be right in the middle of the process where we're still ripping the idea up, right? But they've practiced it to some friend and the friend's like, no, you should do this thing. And I'm like, wait a minute. Not saying that nobody else's, input is valuable, but I'm like, you have to think about where your feedback's coming from, because everybody's qualified to give you that, how they feel about something, but not everybody's qualified to give you the technical piece of it. And I think there's times when we need to look for the technical feedback. And then there's other times where we're like now ready to say, okay, now how do you feel about this whole thing? Does that make sense?
That does.
Absolutely.
It does.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just give you a quick recent experience, Cathey, that I think speaks to that exactly. So I work with, I'm working on these series for, different channels. I work with individual writers and producers. So they'll send me those scripts before it even goes to edit, or I'm watching these first cuts, and those are professionals, and they, they're very talented, and the words they put on page or the cut they first present, they're convinced is working or close to working. Right. So this is the technical part, the professional part, where I can look at it and say, again, I'm just one person in this chain, but I can look at it and go, you know what? This is moving too slow. You've got the right beats here, but it's moving too slow. You got to cut some stuff out. Or you've got this story here. It's too complicated. I can't follow it. It's you get too many twists and turns. We got to cut some stuff out. So that's the technical side of it. That's where someone who, again, I'm not saying me per se. I'm just saying that this is what you're talking about. There's a professional coach, producer, professional somebody, or a trusted source that can give you that. So it's not even opinion about how good or bad the story is. It's like, you got to do X and Y so the story works, or so your presentation works. Like, there's some basic fundamentals about pacing, vocabulary that I'm sure you and I, or Mark, the three of us, I'm sure that it's not the exact same language. There's a lot of overlap with working with these kind of pieces that are going to a wider audience, right?
Yeah.
So I was watching, apparently over the holiday break, I was doing a lot of watching Friends and watch the Whitney Houston movie, I Want to Dance with Somebody, right? And there's a scene in there that you just reminded me of she's about to perform for the first time on the Merv Griffin show. Wow, just really aged ourselves right there. And her mother is backstage, and she's telling the piano player to pick up the pace. But her father's like, well, you leave the piano player alone. But there was something she knew about speeding up the tempo that would just make it work, right? It was that, as you called it, that subtle shift. And I want to pause for a second and just repeat what you said, because I really would love for people to walk away with this. It's a subtle shift in a presentation that can make it really work. I think that was a really powerful statement. And to marry that statement with something else you said, because Cathey, I love that you brought up this whole point about feeling versus technical feedback. And a big part of that technical feedback is another line that I hope people walk away with. You need people who can poke holes in your idea. Not destroy it, not always support it, but you need the right people who can poke holes in it. Because I'm going to throw another one out that you didn't say today, but you said in other conversations. Even brilliant writers have brilliant editors. You just dropped all kinds of lines on us. Oh, Cathey, he just dropped a whole bunch of lines on us. That was absolutely amazing.
He dropped the lines and then he dropped.
Oh, man. Do you think that's the storm he was talking about?
Maybe. Yeah.
Oh, man.
We'll keep it rolling, because we'll see if he comes.
Yeah.
We'll see if he comes back. I love that you said he dropped a bunch of lines, and then I literally heard this noise. I look up and he dropped. It was that was pretty funny.
Oh, man.
You know what? This was really, that's such a great, I think you're taking a lot of the things that he's saying that he's done naturally, and you're telling, there he is, he's back. All right.
Hello.
There he is.
That was like comedic timing.
You did that on purpose. You did that on purpose. That was a hook.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. So I heard what you said, Mark, and I think at that moment the power fluctuated, and I don't even think the Wi-Fi is back. I'm using my phone right now, so hopefully it's still working okay. But sorry about that. Yeah, you were talking about a subtle shift that can make something work. And yeah, I'll just say I think that's something that I'm actually interesting you picked up on that point, because I don't think it's a lesson that I personally in my career quite understood, and maybe I still don't all the way, until years of being in the business. Like, again, everyone thinks they have these great ideas, and they don't always understand that it has to be shifted a certain way so that everyone understands it or gets it or likes it. And it a lot of times it really is again, the word subtle is important here, because it can just be a slight change in framing that really makes a difference. Doesn't mean the idea doesn't work. It just means like, all right, I got to present it a certain way. It can be as simple as deciding it's a different point of view, right? So you can have a narrator, I'll just use my language, a narrator who is omniscient, or it's a narrator who's a personal individual, like that kind of thing. Or it can be, again, this it's under, if I was doing a whole show about machines that shredded objects, maybe no one watches it. But if it's in the context of, it's a bunch of factories that show us how stuff is made and processed and created, that's the kind of thing I'm talking about. So it's just a shift in how these ideas can resonate with people. I mean, I use that word a lot too. And again, it's in the TV world, it's all about ratings. So you got to find people, you got to find ways to attract people. And of course, there's salacious ways of doing it, right? There's also subtle technical ways of doing it, how to make a story work a little bit better.
Wow, you have landed, Marc. Congratulations, by the way. I mean, just to land on, my mind is blown, because I think the conversation that the three of us are having, we're so close to some of the stuff that we just naturally do that we wouldn't be able to just immediately recognize and just tell people, oh, there's subtlety, or there's, but as we talk through it, we realize what's really going on, behind the works here. And I love this idea of the subtlety is the key. It even makes me think about the angle. It's like you could have a really great idea, but the way that you pitch that angle to people is going to make all the difference. I've literally watched, and I've coached people for pitch training where they're pitching for angel investing. I've literally watched people that have an idea that I'm like, oh my gosh, that's going to be a multi-billion-dollar product. And then the person goes and talks, and you're like, oh, why are you talking about the technical aspects of it? Nobody cares.
Exactly.
You're not showing them the potential of it.
Exactly.
Oh my gosh. And so
That's
the idea was really great, but the subtlety of how they chose to position it was terrible. Or vice versa. Somebody doesn't have a great idea, but then they build it up and make it this huge thing, which Savas, I think this is what you talked to a little bit of, the, manipulating sometimes the audience, because the audience sometimes buys into something, because we get hooked into something and then we buy into something. And does it always produce on the other end? Not always. So the subtlety, it's key. It's critical.
I got to tell you, this whole idea just, for me, just went into a next level, because aside from presentations, documentaries, song, music, I even just started thinking, and Cathey, I think it's because you were talking about coaching, even everyday feedback. Sometimes the feedback that we're giving to other people is, oh, no, that's wrong. You got to do it this way. And as opposed to, instead of knocking somebody's idea or knocking the way they've done it, helping them find that subtle shift to make it work. It's almost like, and Cathey, I think you've said this, there's no such thing as a bad idea, but there is a such thing as a subtle shift.
Yeah, as a bad way of expressing the idea. Yeah, exactly.
Well, I'd like to add something to that, Marc. As you were saying it, it triggered another thought about that process, which is sometimes it's about, the subtle shift, but to get to that person's point of view, perspective, like an authentic presentation. Right? Everyone has this idea, and sometimes it's like, oh, I saw this TV show or this song, I'm just kind of going to copy that and I'll use that to make my idea work. And that won't work, because you can tell it's not authentic. So someone has an idea, whatever it is, they want to express something, and it's about, the shift and how to frame it, but at its core is, how do we get to, what you're trying to say, or what you want your project to say? Like, how do you make that work? And that's what my job is working with producers and directors or for these shows is like, okay, our goal is to do this. How do we make it do that and not what somebody else is trying to do or trying to say? Like, how do we make it say that? So it's the same, it's two sides of the same coin, in other words. Like, we're trying to just frame, we're not trying to say that's wrong, like as technical advisors. It's like, oh, you know what, there's a better way to do it, or have you considered this? Or maybe you don't want that, right? Or are you sure you want, like, that kind of thing. So yes, I agree with you. It's not about saying it's wrong. It's not wrong. It's not wrong, but it's also not perfect. There's no way. You can't do it perfect the first time. You just can't. It's possible.
Yeah.
There's no perfection from the first step, right? It just doesn't work that way.
Savas, can I take what you just said and go one level deeper on that too? I literally just had this conversation with really good friend of mine, another speaker, Marc, really phenomenal speaker. And we were talking about an exercise that we use when we're training people. And we both agreed that we used some variation of this. And so I'll tell you what it is. We'll ask the audience, instead of asking the audience a general question when we're training on storytelling or speaking, we won't just say, like, what do you think are some great attributes of great speakers? Because people that aren't professional, they can't pull those out of their head. They're just like, not boring the audience. I don't know, not going too long, like whatever, they can't really. But then if you ask the specific question of, think of the best speaker that you can think of. And it could be a comedian, it could be an actor, it could be somebody that could be somebody at church, school, could be anywhere, it doesn't matter, right? Then tell me why you think they're great. Is it because they use humor? Is it because, and then whatever that thing is, it's like, okay, like I would say Kevin Hart's one of my favorite comedians. I cannot be Kevin Hart. But why do I like him? Because I think he takes things and he blows them up to a really big thing, and that's funny. Can I do that thing? I can do that. But see, so I can do that thing that he does. I can get to the heart of what he does, but do it in my way and not do it in his way, which is also, I think, what you've done with shows. It's like, if you figured out a formula that works with another show, you can say, okay, our documentary, our show, it doesn't have that style or whatever, but what is that heart of what the other show got to, that you're like, oh, that really seemed to work. And I think that's why you'll see a lot of kind of what seems to be formulaic sometimes, but it works for shows and movies and books, and there's a certain way that we can digest information.
No, I actually like what you just said. It's a really clever way to deconstruct something, that if a person's trying to create something, to look at the things that they like, and then figure out what they like about it. And when you said that, Cathey, it got me thinking. I do that all the time. I didn't even realize it till you said it. So if I'm starting a project, I like, okay, I like the way that, I'll just use these generic examples. I like the way that show looked. Why did I like the way oh, the camera was doing this and this and this. Oh, I might take that, put that in my pot. And then, oh, I like the way that one sounded. So, because it was doing this. So let me take that idea about music. I like the way this one right? So suddenly you're creating your own little recipe, but you're building on stuff around us. And you're right. This is probably evolution on all levels, but just let's stay in the entertainment space for a second. Everything's kind of, oh, this is why when you hear like, okay, I got an idea for a show. It's a cross between, Batman and Julia, whatever. Like it's always a cross. That's how you do it. It's like you get the idea. That's what it is. It's sort of taking elements people have already tried and then creating something from those. But that's how you do it.
I love that.
Yeah. I want to go back to the coaching thing for a second, because Cathey, what you also touched upon is sometimes it's a subtle shift in the way you ask a question.
Yeah.
Right? You knew what you were going for, but you're not going to get the answer, the response that you're looking for unless you make that little shift.
Yeah, like if you ask somebody that question of like, what do they like so Marc, that's brilliant that you noticed that, because that's probably the reason why somebody unqualified in your technical area of expertise is not qualified to give you the technical piece, because they can't answer the bigger why. They can go down to the specific, like, oh, I didn't like when you said your grandmother died, and then right after you laughed about it, or like whatever, right?
Yes.
But they're like, I don't understand the bigger piece, which was the bigger question of like, what do you think is good speaking attributes? And they can't answer that, but then they can say, oh, I like this from somebody. So yeah, I think what a brilliant dissection of everything that we do, to just say that like anybody can create something. This is why anybody can be creative, I think. Anybody can be creative.
Anybody can. And I also want to emphasize this most recent point as well. This idea that you can create a new recipe by not just thinking about what you like, but thinking about why you like it. What is it? And I don't think that many people explore that next level question. You know, it's just, I like it. Why?
That's
I don't know.
I like it,
I just
Mark.
like
I'm
it.
stealing that. I'm stealing that and using it for myself because I think that's really, I never quite thought of it that way. It's like, one is like, I do like it, but why do I like it? I think that opens up a whole bunch of other possibilities underneath it. I like it. I'm stealing it. I'm using it next to my.
He's like, this is a Savas original idea. No,
I just love that question. I think it's a really good one. Like, you like it, why? Right? I like it because of, I feel something, or I see something, or I'm like, there's 100 answers you can come up with a why. It's a really good one. I like that.
Yeah, I like how I like how you sum that up. It's probably a better way to ask that, right? Think of things, because then you could ask that question in any area. It doesn't have to be about what's your favorite speaker or movie show or what, TV show or music or whatever. You can just say, you literally can take that and say, what do you like and why? Like, I do like that. And then
I think the answers will surprise. Sorry, Cathey.
No, go ahead, Savas.
No, just to keep going with that, because I think the answers are surprising. Some of you think, oh, why? Well, it's because it's good. But then if you keep asking the question honestly, right, and really thinking about it,
why is it good?
Right. What is it about that? I think it's just not to overdo it, but it's a really clever way to approach it. To what do you like and then why? And then see where that goes. And maybe nothing else, and maybe nothing. I mean, I'm just in a good mood that day. But it might be that there's something about the presentation, whatever it is, the way it looked, the way it sounded, the kinds of areas it touched on, whatever it is, you could surprise yourself. Which is why I like that question so much, because it can open up all kinds of possibilities.
I'll tell you why I like that question also. Because there's an element of when you ask people not only what do you like and why do you like it, where you get to discover why they like it, but I think you also get to discover something about the person. I like it because there's just getting to know somebody on a deeper level is finding out why they like certain things, right? Like Cathey, you and I talked about the whole Rocky series, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I remember telling you that one of the reasons why I like the Rocky series is because he always seems to find inspiration from his wife.
That's interesting.
Right? Like, I always remember the second one always stands out to me the most, because Adrian went into the coma after giving birth, and Rocky just sat in the church, in the hospital, did not want to train, nothing. And even when she came to, he did not want to fight until she told him. And in 4, which is one of my favorites, when she showed absolutely, Rocky, you can't win, right? That like destroyed him. And even though he went to Russia to train, he did not really get into his groove until that scene when all of a sudden she's walking across the snow. His inspiration came, he found that. So I just like that, because there's something about me that just likes when you kind of get that support. So there, you just learned something about me from learning why I like Rocky.
Well, and now we're touching on a level where I think just that question alone, when you're trying to dissect something, and if you're trying to create something else, being a better connoisseur of anything will make you a better person. I have a friend that he said that him and his wife will sit, and they're big foodies. And when they eat, they won't just eat something and say, oh, I really enjoy this. They'll say, what's good? And they drink a lot of cocktails too. And they'll go like if they're dissecting a cocktail, they'll go, it's kind of a smoky, nutty flavor with a hint of like fruity. And they say that there was a study that was done in Europe somewhere that said when people actually talk about their food that way, they enjoy it a lot more when they actually think about the technicality of the food, if they can describe the food to another person. Isn't that, I never thought about that. I had that conversation with my friend like a couple of weeks ago, and so I never put that together until now. But that's why you become a better connoisseur of whatever it is that you're asking the question about. Why do I like that? Well, if you listen to music and say, like a musician, anybody who's a musician, and we all know musicians, and they're very snobby about things that they like usually, right? They're like, oh, pop, come on. It's like 2 chords. It's like, whatever, like it's, and you listen to it. But so they could, their answer would probably be a lot different than ours, right? They'd be like, wow, well, I'm really listening for blah, blah, blah. And we're just like, ooh, I like a catchy beat. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm that simple. Like I like a catchy beat or something. So I don't know. I think being a connoisseur of it as well is helpful, like understanding how to digest it.
I think you're also saying in another way, you are being mindful about something, right? Like you're talking about flavors.
Yeah. Yep.
It's just sort of paying attention to that. It's the same thing if we were creating something. And coming back to what you said, Mark, about why you like something, it's tapping into that, not to get too metaphysical here, but there's a mindfulness to it, like thinking about, okay, why do I like this? Oh, it's because it, to go back to food, oh, because it's crunchy. I like the crunch about it. But if you don't stop to think about it, you're going to miss something probably important.
Right.
I love that I love that in this conversation, we took this idea and now you talk about reaching a wider audience and making it about everybody. This has now become for filmmakers, songwriters, television producers, documentary producers, coaches who want to give feedback, people who want to watch Rocky movies, restaurants.
The Princess Bride, right? Like,
Yeah. Oh, and the business pitch, right? You said that too.
Yeah, pitching.
Right?
Yeah, pitching for
pitching
angel
ideas,
investment.
which people have to do every day. You don't have to be someone going to some capital venture capitalist. You could just be someone who has pitching idea to your supervisor, or your boss, right? Or even any coworkers. Like, hey, if we did something differently, it's the same thing, right? You're pitching an idea and trying to sell concept in a way that resonates with that person next to you, with a wider audience. I mean, it hopefully, yeah, it can work in a lot of situations, I think.
Wow. You just answered a couple of questions from the beginning. Where does a good idea come from? How do you make it go viral? How do you promote an idea to everybody? I mean, how do you make something fun to watch or fun to listen to and interesting? I mean, like you said, all of those different things over the course of 60 minutes. And we did not even just speak to, as we just said, to aspiring film producers. Like we just spoke to everybody on the planet. And that was like 101 of how do you make an idea good, but also how do you make it relatable for everybody? That's me already like synthesizing everything that I just heard in the last hour. It was absolutely amazing, as I expected it to be. I'm curious, and Cathey, feel free to jump in if you want to synthesize as well. I'm curious how, Savas, you would synthesize this conversation. But Cathey, I want to throw it to you first. How would you synthesize?
Yeah, I'll synthesize first because Savas can have the last word on this because he's the one that came up with this idea and started this whole, Savas, you started this whole thing and it turned into a beautiful, wonderful conversation. And I love it.
Thank you.
I think my mind has been blown several times. If I really did, one thing that's inspired me that if I had to boil it down to its simplest form is that anybody can be creative. You just have to look at everything. You have to consider everything. You have to understand everything. You have to be mindful about everything. You have to understand the ecosystem of everything. Like, and then if that's the case, who can't be creative? Anybody can. It's a discipline. It's a discipline to ask all these questions, to scratch the surface. It's a discipline. It takes a lot of guts to hand somebody your script or your song or your book or your speech and say, oh, I think it's awesome. Like, what do you think? And then, so that's kind of my take on it.
I think, trying to find the right words here, but I think you just said something, Cathey, I want to build on, which is that anyone can do this. And people have done anything, any idea anyone has, any presentation, any TV show, any book, any creative enterprise, any pitch to sell. Someone's done it before you. Someone had to go down that road before you, learn some lessons. There's some fun. So it's not this magical, mysterious. Some people just are creative. Some people just are good communicators. There's some of that, of course, maybe that they can navigate this process a little bit easier. There's basic tenets, right? There's people that have done it before that can help you. There's basic ideas. We talked about shaping things. What do you actually want to, like, what concept do you actually want to sell? What idea do you want people to buy into? There's framework. So whether it's finding a book, whether it's finding a literal professional, there are ways to help tailor this so that whatever idea a person has doesn't just get lost on the page or lost in translation, right? There are ways to make it resonate. It's not just some mysterious concept. That's kind of what I'm picking up from the talking to the two of you, because we overlap a lot. And there's a lot of these things like, oh yeah, you do that, I do that, you do that, I do that. It can't be an accident that we do this. That there are these basic ideas that have come up, whether through our own experience or talking to people who've been there, can help guide us. So I think that to me was the most enlightening thing about chatting with the two of you, is like, oh yeah, it's not just random. There are some basic formulas here that we can apply in a lot of places.
Fascinating. Well, like Cathey said, there was a whole conversation that came before this that we just have to let everybody at some point watch. Because if this conversation blew my mind, or anybody else's, like, wait till the other one. It's absolutely amazing. Sava Georgalis. For anybody out there in the world who's watching, who wants to learn more about how to tap into that creativity, who wants to learn more about how to promote an idea to get to everyone, who wants to learn about how to consider everything and be more mindful, who wants to learn about that subtle shift. How do they find you? No, I was gonna say, how would they find you so that they can learn more?
Me? Oh gosh. Well, there is an IMDb page, which is out there. That's for the TV professionals that list my stuff. But I don't know how else. I mean, I'm honored and flattered that anyone would want to chat with me, but I mean, I can send I don't know, email, website. I don't have a website, Mark. I'm sorry. I'm just sort of a freelancer who bounces around from here to there. But yeah, I mean, hopefully anything in this discussion triggers some ideas and can lead to finding other people and concepts that can be helpful. But yeah, you know where to find me, Mark and Cathey, if you have any questions.
Yes, we do.
Yes, we do.
I don't have a storefront, unfortunately, like you guys do. So.
Well, listen, we're glad that you're in our universe. You definitely have tapped into our creative muscles tonight. And we thank you so much for having this conversation with us. And to anybody else out there who feels that they have a creative idea and just need to find a way to frame it, or need to find that subtle shift, Cathey and I would love to have a conversation with you. We absolutely adore and cherish these idea conversations, as we like to call them. So whether it's you or whether it's somebody you know who wants to talk about an idea that you have, go to our website. It's About to Go Down Show. We'd love to have you on. We'd love to explore your idea, and we'd love to help you to reach more people and make that subtle shift, because everyone and every idea is creative. You just need a subtle shift. You heard it here. You'll always hear it here, because we're always going to bring it every time, every single way. This is another episode. Thank you for joining us on It's About to Go Down.